Hey guys, it's Danny here and welcome back to my channel. Today we're jumping into astrology and we're going to talk about what the sun, moon and rising represents and what it means in your chart. So let's get into it. So in one of my recent videos, I spoke about why astrology is more than just your sun sign or your star sign, which is also another name for it. And so today I'm going to be talking about what the sun sign represents in astrology, what the moon represents, and what the ascendant represents. So we're going to go into a little bit more detail today about what each of these represent. So when going to an astrologer, or if you have any kind of knowledge around astrology at all, the first three things that we look at when looking at your birth chart or trying to understand you as a person according to astrology, we look at the sun sign, the moon, and the rising sign. So we're just going to talk about what each of those actually mean in astrology, just so you guys get a clear idea on what the significance is of it and, you know, what it kind of means when we're talking about it in your chart. So the sun, moon and rising sign are the three main aspects and kind of points in your chart that we look at when we're trying to understand your personality. These are sort of the parts of you that encapsulate who you are, and when we're trying to get to know you, we're able to look at the sun, moon and rising sign to understand your kind of personality and kind of what drives you and things like that. So of course we do generally look at all the planets, but the first three ones that we look at are these planets, and that's because they give us some insight into you. So when looking at the sun sign, what the sun sign represents is it is the ego and the personality. It is that part of us that kind of shines really bright and that part of ourselves that we show to other people. And it also is kind of like the center of who we are. So if you think of like the sun in the solar system, everything revolves around the sun. So the sun is sort of that part of us that drives us forward, and it's what kind of that part that represents us being given life, so to speak. The sun also represents how we give energy and how we express ourselves. So it's also the part of us that, you know, self-expression, a little bit of like our creativity as well can come into play with the sun. And it's how we view the external world. So it's our kind of perception of the world as well. So basically the sun is the part of us that we put outwards. It's a part of us that we give to other people, that energy we put out to other people, and that part of us that other people may see. Although it's not always the first thing that we see, which is what I'm going to talk about a little bit later on in this video. But another thing that the sun also represents is it can represent some kind of masculine energy. So when we're talking about masculine energy, it's not the complete decider because Mars is another planet that represents that. But wherever the sun is placed, it can represent your relationship with your father or the relationship with an important male figure in your life. So if you think of the sun as being burning bright, it's this kind of ball of fire or gas in the sky. And that is kind of, you know, when we're referring to the sun in terms of astrology, it's also that part of us that can demand attention. So it's that part of us as well that we want to be kind of seen. So it's that part of us that kind of might seek and demand attention, and also the way that we want to be perceived in the world. So that's another way that the sun could be interpreted, as how we want to be perceived, how we want other people to see us. And so basically, to sum up what the sun represents, it's that kind of force that gives us energy and that kind of underlying force that we have to drive us through life that we are experiencing. So then when we move on to the moon and what the moon represents in astrology and in your chart, the moon is the internal world. It is the emotions. So when we think of the sun being the big personality that's going out there, going out into the external world and showing itself off, we then have the moon, which is the internal world, the emotions, and kind of that secret side of ourselves that we're not going to explicitly throw out there. So the moon depicts our emotional temperament, how we process our emotions, what we need to feel safe, and also how we seek comfort. So to give you an example of how the moon can play out, if you were having a really crap day where you're feeling really emotional, feeling really low, your moon would be able to depict how you're going to process through those emotions. So if you have your moon in Sagittarius, just as an example, you may want to go out and party and celebrate with some friends, as opposed to someone who has their moon in Cancer, who might want to go home, you know, eat some food, do some cooking, kind of be around loved ones, just to give you some contrast of how the moon can help us understand how we process our emotions. So the moon also represents the instinctual self, so how we kind of act on our instincts, which can, play out in how we act on emotions, if we're impulsive or if we think our emotions through, do we overanalyze our emotions, things like that. And it's also the unconscious mind, so it can also play out in things that we kind of have buried down and comes out through our emotions. And just like how I said the sun represents the kind of father figure or the male figure in our life, the moon represents the mother figure or that kind of maternal figure that we have in our life as well. So it can give astrologers a lot of insight into your relationship based on where it's placed, and also wherever it's placed, it shows us what is emotionally important to you and what do you cherish the most in regards to your emotions and how you process them as well. And just to sum up, the moon is also that intuitive kind of part of us where we can feel into our body. So the moon also allows us to feel connected to our emotions, to be intuitive, to trust our emotions and trust what we're kind of being given as well. So that is what the moon represents in astrology. So then when we move on to the rising sign, the last one for this video, the rising sign is not a planet or a zodiac sign or anything like that. It's actually just a marker in your chart, and it shows us where the eastern horizon was at the time that you were born. And the rising sign is the indicator for your whole chart. So it kind of wherever your rising sign is in your chart when you were born, it then depicts how the rest of your chart is going to look. So the rising sign is that first impression, the part of us when someone first meets us for the very first time. That's the part of us that generally they see. So that comes before seeing the sun or even seeing the moon. The rising sign is the part of us that is the first impression. So when you walk into a party, that is kind of who's on display and who they're going to see, and it's kind of how someone's going to depict you upon first impression. So the rising sign is also the part of us that can depict our physical appearance. So depending on what zodiac sign your rising sign is in, the rising sign is also known as the ascendant. So if you do kind of hear of rising sign or ascendant, it is the same thing. They are interchangeable, these two terms. So it depicts how you look. So if you have your rising sign in, a fire sign as opposed to a water sign, that's going to change your appearance very much. It also depicts our style, kind of our interests as well, what we like. So a lot of it has to do with our physical appearance and kind of the things that we enjoy. But then when we look at it on a more deeper level, beyond just the kind of first impression and the way that we want to be perceived and things like that, it's also who you are evolving to in this lifetime. So it's not just those kind of more surface level type kind of energies, it's also who you are becoming, and it's kind of the truth of who you are. So in evolutionary astrology, which is the astrology that I use, we do believe that kind of what you want to attain for in this lifetime is you want to try and attain more of your rising sign than your sun sign. So a lot of people will tend to associate themselves with their sun sign, which is perfectly fine. It's very common, it's quite normal, and we also, based on just kind of pop culture astrology, we're kind of taught to try and be like our sun sign, or that we're meant to be like our sun sign. But we actually want to kind of attain for something even higher, because the sun represents that ego self, that kind of like part of us that just wants attention in a way. So we want to kind of try and actually get to that point where we are our rising sign, because that's who we are evolving into and who we are meant to become in this lifetime. So that is a little bit about the rising sign and the ascendant, and that's the difference between what the sun represents, what the moon represents, and what the rising sign represents. I am going to be posting some more videos based on the actual what the sun represents in each zodiac sign, so keep your eyes open for that, because that's going to be coming very soon. But this is just a little bit of an introduction into the basics of astrology and kind of the three main things that we look at in astrology. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this, and if you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up and make sure to click the subscribe button down below if you haven't already. Thank you so much for joining me again today, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!